We've talked about a lot of third-party Pro controllers for the Nintendo Switch, and there are a lot of them out there, but something we haven't talked about yet is third-party controller alternatives for Joy-Cons. This is the wireless retractable game controller from, I have no idea how to pronounce this, Ipaga? I'm not sure. But the point is, this is a retractable controller kind of similar in design to the Game Vice, which was definitely originally primarily meant for phones and tablets, but it's been readapted to also work as a Bluetooth controller for the Switch. Now, setting this guy up looks pretty easy, so let's go ahead and give it a shot right now. First, before you actually put the Switch inside of the controller vice thing, you need to add these little rubber stoppers to actually make it fit comfortably without, messing up the sides of the Switch. So you're supposed to just kind of lay them in there. Yeah, that feels pretty good. And then, like a lot of these other kind of vice controllers, all you gotta do is kind of just rest it in there, and then you should be able to just pull it. And there we go. You can see like how the rubber's kind of just filling that spot. It's kind of a cheap solution, but it's a really smart cheap solution, if that makes sense. It's just don't lose those, please. Okay, so now that we've got this at least set up physically, let's go ahead and get into a game and try to actually make it run. Okay, go to controller setup, and then on the controller, I'm supposed to hit and hold the home button for a while, and that'll put it into syncing mode. Oh, wait, I gotta put it in switch mode too. So on the side here, there's the different modes you can put this guy in, and it's not words, it's just logos for all the popular stuff. So there's even a little Switch logo right here. Just gotta put it to that. Okay, now let's try. And then we sit here and wait a while until something happens. Ah, there it is. Okay. Actually works perfectly fine so far. That's kind of cool. That wasn't that difficult to set up. Something I'm noticing right away though is that on the controls for this, it's actually the Xbox One configuration where the A and the B and the X and the Y are flipped versus how they are on the Switch. And it looks like the Switch is actually reading those buttons as what they say they are. So it's not the kind of thing where B is now A and A is now B. It's actually just that the positions are different, but the buttons are right. So if you're really used to not looking at the buttons and just kind of feeling out like, oh yeah, the bottom button does this, the top one does this, it won't work for this. You need to actually flip in your head what does what. That probably sounded more confusing than it meant to be. I will say too that while there certainly is like a cheaper element to this thing in general, just the feel of the plastic and button quality and everything, the grip design is definitely more comfortable than using the actual Switch. I mean, that is kind of one of the big downsides to using the Switch in handheld mode, is that it's definitely not designed to be comfortable for most people because it doesn't really have any kind of grip shape. It's just a thin Joy-Con design, which doesn't work well over time. This is a lot more comfortable right out of the gate, which I do like. I'm curious about something too, so let's see. So we got it synced up. What happens if I put the Switch to sleep? Is this guy gonna stay on? Is it gonna stay connected? Okay, so it turned off. And then can I use it to turn the Switch back on? Okay, so I put the Switch to sleep, and it looks like the controller just completely shut off. So I can't turn the Switch back on using it. Let's turn this back on manually and see if it at least like resyncs right away. Nope. I think I have to manually sync this guy every single time I turn the Switch on, which depending on how you use your Switch may or may not be super annoying because at least for me personally, when I'm using my Switch in handheld mode, I am constantly putting it to sleep for just little bits of time. Like every time I'm taking a break from a game, I don't even use the game's pause screen. I just put it to sleep immediately. Something like this where it disconnects every time you do that, you're gonna notice that. You're gonna realize how much you put your Switch to sleep because you have to deal with this every time. That wasn't too bad though, because at least games will auto-prompt you with the control screen. Something else that I noticed, and the instructions do cover like how to handle this, this has almost just as many buttons as a pair of Joy-Cons. I mean, there's a couple things that are replaced, like you don't have a plus and minus button, but you do have start and select that do the same thing. But the one button you're short on is you don't have a button that would do screen capture. And the way they solve that on this is the home button on it, pressing it really quickly to screen capture, holding it for like a split second will do the actual home maneuver, but that's also weird because the Switch also has controls for holding the home button. So you have to time it to where you don't hold it super long or else you just have like the overlay options come up, but you need to hold it longer than just a simple press because otherwise you're just gonna take a screen capture every time you use it. That's a little annoying. I kind of wish they just didn't support screen capture at all and the home button worked like a home button, because at the end of the day, if there's any button you can be missing on Joy-Cons, it's screen capture.
I never!
I mean, everything else about this thing works pretty well so far in practice. I mean, it's comfortable. The buttons aren't the best, but it's getting the job done just fine. And I can definitely say that as far as just the grip design alone goes, I could actually probably play this a lot longer than using Joy-Cons. There's a lot of other benefits I get from using Joy-Cons, but this is definitely a lot more comfortable. By the way, if you're wondering how we got our hands on a white Switch, this is actually a skin that was made by today's sponsor, dbrand. They made a whole bunch of different Switch skins that don't damage your system. They can work on the Switch itself, on Joy-Cons, and they have dock designs as well. You can get them in a bunch of different colors, or just a nice, clean, crisp white, which looks awesome. Make sure to check out the link down below. You know, after spending some time with this thing, I gotta say, this is actually a lot better than I first thought it was going to be. I mean, it's still not a great controller, the sticks are very loose, the buttons aren't that great, the placement could be a little better, but there are some merits to this design, because while it does certainly bulk up the overall size and shape of the Switch, this is a much more comfortable controller than using the Joy-Cons. You know, I even switched back afterwards, and I have to say that while the Joy-Cons definitely had better buttons and everything, I immediately noticed the difference in just how much more uncomfortable those small controllers are on the side, because it's just such a thin piece of plastic. Compared to this, where you have an actual proper grip, this is a lot more comfortable. The fact that it disconnects whenever you shut off the Switch is a little annoying, but it's actually not as big of a deal as I first thought it was going to be, because as long as you don't have any other controllers connected to the Switch, every time you start it back up, it's going to prompt you to connect a controller, where all you have to do is once again sync this guy to it. So it's a little annoying, but not nearly as bad as you might think at first. So yeah, it's actually a pretty good controller overall. I don't think I would recommend it still for anybody that wants to do any kind of intense serious gaming, because once again, the buttons and sticks and everything are just not great, but it's such an improvement for comfort that if you just want to be able to kind of play some more laid-back games for very long periods of time, this is going to be much better on your hands. And it really kind of starts provoking the thought of what Nintendo could learn from this. There's been rumor before that Nintendo has thought about doing other Joy-Con designs aside from the ones we already have, and if that's true, this should be one of the first things they attempt, because yeah, the larger size impacts the portability a little bit, but that's why it's an alternative option and not the one the system comes with. But having a larger, more comfortable controller and having all the benefits of an actual first-party Nintendo design where you have the better buttons and all the extra functionalities and, you know, buttons here that aren't flipped would just be awesome. It would make the portable mode of the Switch even better.